start off and talk a little bit about yourself just so I can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Molly Sullivan. Right now, I'm director of corporate development for a company called Space Tango, but my background's in biomedical engineering and biotechnology, and I kind of found myself at Space Tango on a very winding path. So happy to talk about that today and just in general how I found my love for science, engineering, and STEM in general.
Okay, so we'll get into all that. But first, did you know that you wanted to do all of this when you were younger? Is this something that you knew you wanted to get into? More specifically, did you know you wanted to be doing something in STEM? How did you kind of start your childhood with relations to what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I knew that this is where I wanted to end up from kind of a really early age. I think it kind of came about later on in high school or so. Growing up, I was very sports focused. And so I played a lot of sports, focused my time on that, but also really tried to study well in school, learn everything I could, and my love for science and math kinda came out early high school. I had some teachers that were able to expose me to a lot of different subjects and a lot of different areas that I never knew existed, like a lot of people. So I wouldn't say that I necessarily saw myself ending up here from super early on. I kind of found it along the way.
What did your parents do, and did that have any effect on you?
So growing up, being kind of in our household, my parents, I think the biggest thing they did that really made me into who I am today is was with that focus on sports. So we basically were able to try anything we wanted. So I played everything from basketball, volleyball, tried tennis for a bit, tried lacrosse, tried swimming, kind of tried everything that there was to figure out what I liked. And I think that's just a common theme that's kind of carried itself through my education, through my career, and it really started in those childhood years. I think growing up with that sports focus helped me maintain a focus on not only remaining competitive in whatever I was doing, and making sure I was keeping up with my skills, keeping up with the most current knowledge on that sport, plays, things like that, but also gave me chances to learn leadership and management, whether that was working with your teammates on those teams or leading a team in the form of captain. Those really taught me a lot of skills that, again, I've taken throughout my education and throughout my career. So I would say that was the biggest thing in my childhood was just our parents giving us the flexibility to try anything we wanted and find what fit for us and find how we operate in that most effectively.
Would you say that at some point you wanted to for sports, like, was there any point when you wanted to commit for sports and go to college for that and not really think as much about doing strictly academics?
Yeah, for a while I did. For a while, I was thinking that volleyball was gonna be what I did in college, not focused on school. I still wanted an education, and I still wanted to learn some really cool things, but volleyball was definitely what I had in mind through middle school, maybe through the beginning of high school, and that kind of switched when I started taking some of the higher level classes in high school, things like calculus that kind of really, really pulled on some strings in my brain and made me think a little bit deeper about how, I guess, fundamental things in science and engineering can apply to a bunch of different industries. So that's what really opened my mind up. Um, my mom actually was also involved with hosting a STEM fair at our high school. They brought in a bunch of companies from all over the region, and one of them was a biomedical device company. So they worked on prosthetics. And that was what really, really sparked my kind of desire to maybe focus on biomedical engineering as opposed to kind of the sports angle and make that my focus for college. And so when I got to college, I actually was going to continue volleyball through. I was just going to play at club on the side, not as a full time D2 D3 thing. But I ended up kind of putting that to the wayside just because of how interested I got in my classes, and knowing that that would be something that I would really be diving deep into.
I think it's really interesting because in the beginning you didn't really know specifically what you wanted to do with STEM or how what track you wanted to go down. Also loving sports and maybe wanting to go to college for sports. I think it's really interesting that kind of your whole future from high school to college kind of changed and you kind of didn't really know where it was going, but it ended up going to the right place. So, can you maybe just talk a little bit now about in college, how it was like balancing sports, maybe for club. I know you mentioned that a little bit. And then also just kind of this biomedical interest, how you kind of shaped your whole college experience.
So I definitely kind of turned away from volleyball at that point. I was focused on school. I was focused on finding my friends in a new landscape. Everything was new. I grew up in Rhode Island, and then I went to Miami for college. So it was different place, different people, kind of reinventing not only yourself, but also what you want to do. And so because so much of my life had been kind of sports centered and focused in a small town, you knew your friends, you knew your groups. This was an opportunity to really open that up. And so I was really excited for that. I was on the biomaterials and tissue track of my program. So my program was biomedical engineering, but I focused specifically on things like genetic engineering, tissue engineering, stem cells, and kind of the emerging tech within the biomedical engineering industry. And so as part of the education there, obviously you take a lot of classes at a basic level when you first get in, things like math classes, physics classes, science, biology classes, chemistry, and that kind of all shaped me into where I wanted to go with the track later on. So I wasn't quite sure at the beginning. That's kind of, again, a theme of everything I've been talking about. But as I took those classes, I kind of realized that what I really, really found interesting was these new technologies that use things in the human body to make human health better. So that's kind of how I found that track. But I would say I definitely focused on that and then some clubs as well. That was yeah, a good time.
So would you say that what you learned and what interests you found in college, would you say that those are helpful to what you did out like going out of college, kind of going into like the world?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, kind of having in my program, having a base knowledge of a bunch of the different fields that inform my field was really important to me. And I think that's something that, again, I also have just kind of pulled through my life because of sports, just kind of knowing how most games work, knowing how to play, I guess, play and operate in most scenarios in a sports context. Was something I wanted to carry on into my career. So anytime I had a new job, I would kind of try to get a base understanding of what informs that field so that I could make sure that I could actually make impact. So there's a couple examples of this, but after grad school, one of my first entrances into the space industry, which is the industry I'm in right now, was an internship in policy. And so that was very far from anything I had ever studied, any world I had ever been in. It was very much legislation, regulation, let alone the space part. And so that I guess all of my education and my experiences up to that point prepared me for that, such that when I got into that position, I really made an effort to do a lot of research kind of on my own time into what were the things that brought the industry to where it was at that point. Those were all the things that was affecting the policy changes that were being made, the standards, the regulations being made in the industry, and not knowing that history would have been really detrimental to what I was trying to do. So that was kind of, I guess, the underlying concept that I try to bring to everywhere is knowing how all the fields kind of interplay with each other, which is kind of what biomedical engineering is, anyways. It's a lot of science, chemistry, biology, and engineering all combining into one. And so having that mindset, almost a systems engineering mindset in my career, has really, really helped me to be able to make an impact and connect dots in whatever role I'm in.
I feel like that's really interesting. Would you say that even before that, right after college, you were for sure set on going to grad school? Like, was that like a goal that you had in mind? And when did you figure out that you knew you wanted to go to grad school?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily something that I thought I was gonna do right after undergrad. I always knew I probably wanted to get another degree. I love learning, and so that was something that I wanted to be able to dive into another topic deeper. When I graduated undergrad, it was the start of COVID, and so, the job market was really tough, and everything was moving online. The whole kinda world was in chaos, and so I think that kind of for me was I guess a helpful forcing function to just go and try to do grad school for a bit. instead of, trying to find a job and starting in the middle of all of that. And so I was accepted into my program, I think a little bit before COVID started, but I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go that route or if I wanted to try to find a job instead. This was probably the beginning of my senior spring semester of undergrad. And so, kind of all the things that came together made me realize that I may as well just go and do this and get some deeper knowledge on a topic that I'm really, really interested in, and then see what happens after that. So my grad program wasn't focused on engineering. It was actually focused on the business of biotech. So the way the program operates is it kind of gives you a light touch on a lot of different aspects that go into running a business, like financial modeling, business model development, regulatory FDA guidance, and kind of prepares you for if you want to make a transition from the engineering science side to being in more of a business role in the biotech world. And so that was something that I always went back and forth on in undergrad was whether I wanted to go and get an engineering job doing the hands-on engineering or, a sales job being a clinical sales specialist who's showing doctors how to use the technology that's being created, or if I wanted to do something completely different on the marketing side. And so that's why that program was really kind of attractive at that point when there was so much chaos going on, to kind of give me more options and I guess more time to figure out what it was I actually wanted to do.
That's really interesting. So, what did you end up specifically going with out of all of the directions you could have gone with? What direction did you specifically end up going with to get to where you are right now?
So, in my master's program, we had a few classes which you may learn this throughout your education and your career, but in my engineering classes, we didn't really talk about what it was that we wanted to do. It was very much focused on the technical, the learning, the algorithms, and the math, as opposed to kind of looking inside and figuring out what you wanted to do with your career and what you wanted to do with your knowledge. And so that was something that we had a whole class dedicated to in my master's program. And so that's when I kind of realized how the space thing was always kind of lingering in the back of my mind. And it kind of gave me, I guess, the realization that I wanted to go for that. So I had taken a lot of classes undergrad on tissue engineering, and a lot of issues you see when you're kind of in the lab, hands on, are due to gravity. So, cells, if you're trying to grow them in 3D, gravity just pushes them down. And so, always kind of in the back of my head, I was reading articles online like, "Oh, do people do this in space? I don't know. No one I don't know if that's a job that people can do. I don't know if that's a sector people are even working in." And when I did my research, kind of the only options that came up were NASA, which is, really difficult for people to get into. And so I wasn't even aware, I guess, at the time there was a commercial space industry. And so through that program and kind of like thinking about the fact that, oh, maybe I do want to try to figure out if there's any other way I can get into this industry, if there's any other people that are doing work in this industry, I started to do some more research and read some books. And I read one book that mentioned this internship, the space policy one I mentioned before. It's the Commercial Space Flight Federation. They're a trade organization for all commercial space companies, and they run an internship program yearly. And so, like I said, it was policy. It wasn't anything that I had done before, but I kind of through those classes decided I wanted to try to get into the industry in some way. And I figured what better way than to potentially work for some people who know a lot of people in the industry and learn about the industry while I was at it. And so applied for that internship, and they eventually introduced me to the company I work with now, Space Tango. They were hiring for a scientist at the perfect time when I was kind of finishing up my internship. And so I got really lucky that all of that kind of aligned. But it did take a while of trying to learn, or trying to accept that maybe I wasn't taking the super linear path to a job right after my master's program. And so finding that path was just it was all over the place. During that time, I did a couple other incubators and accelerator programs kind of focused on founding businesses and what you need to learn to be able to found a business. Because at that time, I was like, I don't know if no one's doing this, maybe I could do it. But luckily, I found some companies that were doing it again through that internship. So that's how I ended up at Space Tango in general.
So now can you talk a little bit about what Space Tango does and what your role at that company is?
So, Space Tango is an enabler of research and manufacturing in space. We've launched about 300 payloads to the International Space Station and have some lunar missions upcoming as well. And what we do is build hardware that basically supports what any researcher or person who wants to make a product in microgravity and beyond wants to do. So, we basically take the processes someone's doing in a lab and automate it all into hardware that then is sent to station, remotely commanded, completely automated, and so it's a really interesting engineering challenge, working with scientists who have normally only ever used, pipettes and petri dishes in the lab, and trying to explain to them that the laws of physics are different when you don't have gravity, and so then you have to engineer your solutions differently. And so when I was hired on as a scientist and worked in that capacity for the first 2 years. And what my job was there was to work with our researchers who wanted to fly things and then work with our engineers internally to make sure that our hardware was doing what they needed it to do. So it was a lot of almost scientific and engineering consulting and kind of tying the two ends together. A lot of back and forth on designing hardware, testing hardware, integrating hardware. And then about 2 years in, I moved back to DC and have been working in a business operations and corporate development capacity on kind of anything they need me to work on. So, a mix between doing policy and government relations work here in DC, some corporate development work, business development work, and then project management if we need it. We're a really small team. And so, luckily, because of that, I get to learn a lot and I get to work a lot in different capacities. And that's the thing I've loved most about the job. So,
Would you say that coming out of college, you had any idea that you were going to end up in a company like this, or was this a complete, or did you have no idea?
I think I hoped I would, but I think that the barrier to entry that is there for the industry, was also really scary and, kind of represented a really big challenge that I wasn't sure I was gonna be able to kind of succeed in, at that point. When you think about space and biotech, they're both such high-tech emerging industries, and there's so many people that are interested in working in these industries, and so I really thought there was, a slim chance I would actually make it, and so, again, I think the timing really worked out well for me, and it kinda just proves that, sometimes you have to really hold out and just, kind of, I guess, put a lot of effort into, having patience that you will, get to the spot that you'd like to get to, even if it seems like the barriers there are just way too high to overcome.
Okay, so this is kind of like a two-part question, but I'd say more specifically, what advice would you give to someone my age or someone who is really interested in STEM and wants to be a scientist at a company, but they just can't find the right position and they just can't seem to find the right place for them? So, what advice would you give to someone like that? And then also more generally to anyone who can't seem to find the right fit, whether if it's in STEM or in any other topic of interest, what advice would you just give to someone trying to find the right fit and to someone who just feels like they can't see themselves in a company?
Yeah. I would say, again, having patience is the thing that's really paid off for me. It was really tough, honestly, trying to find those first jobs and trying to figure out if it was one going to be a fit, to how I kind of get into these spaces. How do I meet the right people, to learn about what they do in the first place and see if that sounds like something that I want to do, and then to eventually, get a job at these places. And so for me, it was, months of trying to figure that out. And I know that's a position that a lot of people are in right now, and a lot of people are kind of struggling with. And so patience would be the number one thing for me. I think also just not giving up is big, even if you find yourself in a place that you don't necessarily like at first. Things can change and you can make them change for yourself as well. And so that would be another piece of advice. It's never too late to kind of try something new, try something different. That's what I've done so many times. I've switched between the business side to the technical side, to policy, kind of hopped all over the place and switching and taking that time to see different things, experience different things, and learn what works for you also makes you a better asset to whatever company you're going to end up with in the long run. Having those different experiences, those different perspectives, brings a lot to the table, and so that would be the other thing I would say is important. Just know it's not going to be a linear path, and it shouldn't be a linear path in most cases. Um, I think things that you're doing right now, like this podcast, is huge as well, kind of just talking to people, learning what's out there, and making those connections for yourself that, years down the line, might somehow come in handy. So that's the other thing. Personal relationships, are really huge in the way that businesses operate now, and just maintaining those, relationships so that later down the line, if you have an interest in something, you can talk to that person, and learn more about what it would actually be to be in a certain role or a certain industry.
So would you say that if your children want to go down a similar path that you did, what advice would you give them in the sense that you said that it's not linear, and in the sense that let's say that they do not want to do something that you've been interested in like STEM, would you be totally fine with that, and would you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think that as long as someone's hardworking, and determined to go down whatever path they want, that's totally fine. Whatever makes you happy at the end of the day is the most important thing. And so if you're passionate about something, and usually that will turn out well and make you happy in that job. And so I think that's something for people to remember as well. I know STEM is talked a lot about, these days, and it's great, but there's also a ton of other careers out there, a ton of other fields to go into. I have friends doing crazy jobs. My brother, he just graduated undergrad, and he's going to try to start his own windsurfing business now. So there's a lot of different routes you can go, and it's really just what makes you happy and what makes you passionate at the end of the day.
If you have any questions for me, then you can ask, but if not, then that's totally fine. We can wrap up here.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would be curious about you, what's your goal? What's your plan? What are you thinking for your career, education?
So I feel like for me, I feel like people always, ask like, "What do you want to do in college? What do you want to do after college? What do you want to do this and that?" I feel like for me, right now, my interest is definitely something in astrophysics, something in astronomy, something related to space. I don't know where that is going to take me. I don't know if I'll be doing something with business, something with the actual engineering side, but that's where my general interest is right now. But I mean, I don't know if that's going to change in college. I don't know if that's going to change next year, but for me, that's kind of where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and that's super exciting. There's a ton of opportunities in the field, and they should only be getting bigger. So that's great. And anything we can do to help you on your journey, we're happy to help. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for willing to be a guest and taking the time. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.
You too.